Pablo is a professor of commercial law at the Faculty of Law of the National University of Distance Education, based in Madrid, Spain. His current research focuses on financial regulation and international trade, as well as the study and analysis of European legislative policy, primarily in the technology sector. He's worked at a number of universities around the world, including in China and Australia. And he's going to present today on the global trade in the multipolar era. And this kind of ties in nicely with what you were talking about regarding Brazil and India and how these countries are using these public-private partnerships, Bill. So I'll hand it over to Pablo to give us his presentation.
Thank you so much, Roger, and thank you so much for the invitation. Let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the organizers, and in particular to Alan and Roger for convening this dialogue. It is a privilege to contribute at a moment when frank, constructive debate on the future of our economic order is more necessary than ever. The title of my presentation is Global Trade in the Multipolar Era, towards a new North-South cooperation based on Headwing Economics. My remarks address what I consider the defining challenge of our era, the dangerous drift toward the economic fragmentation. We are witnessing the unraveling of decades of integration, replaced by barriers, friendshoring, and financial decoupling. This shift threatens global stability, stifles growth, and weakens our capacity to address shared threats. Too often, the debate is framed as a false choice between the vulnerabilities of unrestrained globalization and the cost of protectionist retreat. But I believe there is a third way. My proposal is a practical framework for Headwing Economics, a model built on three principles: interdependence, mutual prosperity, and rightfulness. These pillars provide a blueprint to move from confrontation to cooperation, not as an idealistic aspiration, but as a strategic necessity. The turn toward economic blocs is not cost-free. The International Monetary Fund estimates that trade fragmentation alone could cost up to 7% of global GDP. Beyond numbers, the price is resilience, innovation, and stability. Legitimate concerns about supply chains and autonomy have led to a retreat into protectionism. Yet this is like treating a fever by breaking the thermometer. It misdiagnoses the illness and worsens the condition. We are already seeing the realignment of global economic wave. The BRICS coalition has overtaken the Group 7 in global GDP based on purchasing power parity. They are building alternative institutions, from the New Development Bank to China's Belt and Road Initiative, worth trillions. In response, the G7 strengthens its own standards and sanctions. But many nations of the Global South are unwilling to pick sides. They prize sovereignty and economic opportunity, often resisting external sanctions while deepening cooperations with China and Russia. The risk is clear: a fractured global economy, an arms race, and entrenched inequality. Against this, Headwing Economics offers a counter vision: competition in markets, cooperation in raising global standards, and collaboration on common threats like climate change or pandemics. For this framework to succeed, it must do three things. First, it must clearly acknowledge bifurcation. The world is not longer one system. Rivalry between models is real. Second, it should position itself as a practical bridge between liberal capitalism and state capitalism. Not merely G7 or BRICS, but a third way rooted in distributed ownership and ethical rules. Third, it must propose a new North-South partnership. Not old-styled aid, but joint ventures that capture value locally. Imagine a mineral-rich country partnering with a foreign firm to process those resources domestically with citizens as shareholders. That is mutual prosperity in practice. The World Trade Organization is in existential crisis. It struggles to address China's state-driven model. Its dispute settlement systems is paralyzed, and the failure of the Doha round revealed the limits of consensus among 164 diverse members. A Headwing-inspired reform should be values-based. Insist on multilateral cooperations rather than unilateralism. Guarantee genuine differential treatment for developing nations. Establish binding rules on corruption and sustainability. It should also embrace pragmatic plurilateralism, allowing smaller groups of countries to advance on digital trades or green goods, while keeping doors open to all. And crucially, it must redesign the appellate body to address concerns of overreach while safeguarding a rule-based system. Without this, the trading order loses its backbone. The relationship between the US and China defines today geopolitical economy. They are deeply interdependent, yet deliberately decoupling in sensitive sectors. Despite tariffs, China remains a vital partner for the US, which also depends on China rare earths for defense and green tech. Meanwhile, the CHIPS Act and exports controls aim to curb China technological rise. The Headwing approach of cooperation, not conflict, suggests a three-part strategy. First one, pragmatic interdependence. Diversify supply chains in critical sectors, but preserves ties in non-sensitive areas. Ethical dialogues. To create bilateral or trilateral working groups, including the European Union, to establish common standards for artificial intelligence, clean energy, and emerging tech. Reframing competition, in third place, not as a zero-sum race for dominance, but as a contest over which model delivers greater prosperity, inclusiveness, and sustainability. Any serious framework must include finance. Global liquidity injections after 2008 and the pandemic inflated asset values held by the wealthy, widening inequality. Cheap debt allow corporations to accumulate more assets, while labor-based wealth stagnate. Ignoring this dimension is a critical gap. For instance, I propose a cooperative financial architecture to complement Headwing Economics, and I think that in this point, some complement is needed. In two areas, a multilateral swap-aligned network to cushion crisis for a broader range of economies, and in the second place, a common standards for investments in sensitive technologies, reducing suspicions through transparency. Headwing promotes distributed ownership. This is a very good idea. Too often, globalization benefits multinationals that maximize efficiency at the expense of the communities. Worker-owned cooperatives and small-medium enterprises, if supported by mechanisms like carbon border adjustments, can become genuine participants in world trade. Headwing Economics offers more than critique. It points toward reform. To make it credible, I propose 4 steps. A dedicated chapter on global trade governance, addressing World Trade Organization's reform. In this point, I think Headwing Economics has to be more ambitious. In second place, ground arguments in data and case studies to validate credibility. In third place, explicitly position itself as a bridge across the G7 BRICS divide, offering an attractive option for the global South. And in fourth place, develop a practical framework for US-China peace based on ethical competition and managed interdependence. Only then will it move from philosophical aspiration to a concrete guide for global reform. Building a fairer multipolar system requires a new commercial and financial contract between North and South. I propose 5 pillars to complement Headwing Economics approach. Firstly, reform rules of origin. Trade agreements that incentivize local value addition. For instance, 0 tariffs on vehicles only if 50% of value is locally manufactured. In second place, cooperative carbon border adjustments. Instead of unilateral green tariffs, revenues should finance transition funds for exporters in the global South. In third place, asymmetric protection. Recognize differences and allows temporary protections of nascent industries while securing access to other markets. In fourth place, financial architecture for shared ownership. Expand special drawing rights to finance sustainable infrastructure and prioritize joint ventures where workers and communities hold equity. And finally, a multipolar roundtable, a new forum including G7, BRICS, African Union, ASEAN, Mercosur, OCDE, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Negotiating rules based on Headwing principles and shared responsibility. To sum up, the choice is not globalization versus deglobalization. It is between chaotic fragmentation and managed interdependence. Headwing Economics provides a path: pragmatic interdependence, mutual prosperity, and rightful governance. It is a vision that rejects both laissez-faire, naivety, and protectionist retreat. and instead charts a cooperative course. It is a vision that is very positive in this moment that we are living. By embedding these principles into trade, finance, and governance, we can replace rivalry with rules and suspicions with trust. The results will not be utopia, but something more valuable, a sustainable, stable, and fair economy in which nations can prosper together. And as I show you in my screen, our task is not to resist in the interdependence, but to govern it wisely, fairly, and with a commitment to share prosperity. Thank you so much, and I hope my presentations is useful for your reflection. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pablo. This is a good way to kind of wrap up this session today, because you start digging into a lot of the practical side of what kind of policies and rules we need to put in place in order to make it work. Yeah, so I appreciate it. Could you stop sharing your screen too, so we can bring everybody back on? So at this point, I think I'd like to open this up for general comments and questions. If you have a question that you'd like to direct to any of our presenters today, then please do so. I think maybe our presenters themselves may have some questions they want to, or comments they want to make on other people's presentations, so you're welcome to do that. Giuseppe, I see you've got your hand up, so could we highlight you and you can speak?
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciated all presentations, and especially to Professor Sanz, I would like to, since he is the only one that mentioned the BRICS. BRICS next year will meet to decide to create a new currency, an alternative currency to dollar. So how can we put them on the same table discussing while they are trying to create a new market, different market, alternative market? Should we create a third currency, international world level currency, alternative to the BRICS one or to the dollars, or should we push the dollar anyway, just changing a little bit the balance between North and South? This is my question.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Your question is very, very interesting. Of course, BRICS has a project, as you know, for a global currency, or for at least for a BRICS area. But I really think that behind this project is not just to promote a global exchange currency for its own markets. Behind this project is the cost is that they distrust on the dollar dominance, the dollar. So they are promoting de-dollarization. So we have to talk about that. But why they are thinking in an alternative currency for the dollar? Because the dollar, of course, the dollar is the global currency, the reserve currency, but is also a weapon in hands of the Western countries, and in particular of the US. So, of course, Russia and China know it. India probably know it as well, and also Brazil and South Africa and other global South countries, and also in the Arabic countries. So they are going to use this project of global currency in the BRICS area to try to de-dollarize and to not to have the risk, to avoid the risk of having its own monetary assets in hands of the Western countries, in Western banks, and the SWIFT system. So this is the reason, in my opinion. And of course, we need to include this in a chapter of Headwing Economics. I think that it will be. I would suggest to introduce a kind of chapter, or at least a kind of epigraph about monetary issues and financial financial instruments for monetary transfers. I think that is a geopolitical issue. I agree with you, Giuseppe. I think that we need to treat that in a wide discussion.
Because also, sorry, just shortly, because they want to reverse the Nixon decision in 1933, where the gold standard finished, and they want to bring back to some kind of to anchor the currency to something concrete, substantial, to prevent the creative finance with this kind of speculations. And this is another important issue for economy. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, this BRICS currency will have as a collateral probably oil, energy assets, and gold,
That's interesting. It'll be an interesting development if they manage to do that. So we'll see. I think you mentioned in your presentation too, Pablo, that creating these cooperative organizations or ventures between different nations. And I'd like to ask Bill Emick again, if you see some way, or have you seen any examples of your private-public partnerships working across international borders in this way, in terms of like an international setup?
Not yet. Not yet, although the Ukraine model will be. The rebuild efforts, the talks that are going on now between the EU and some of the EU financial institutions and local Ukrainian efforts, and even some private capital from the US and US NGOs, would be very much a cross-border activity. So so far, the challenge has really been, one of our goals in social value investing was to ground it in the local, right? So that in the end, the judgment of success is in part defined by the people who are directly affected by the activity. So whether it's in Brazil or in India or in the US, what we felt was that the impacted locality was very often not at the table. So that kind of limited us to focus domestically, wherever the domestic, whether it's Brazil or India or the US. But I think the potential is great for an international cooperation, as you mentioned about the tunnel and the Euro tunnel as well.
So Pablo, do you have any specific ideas of where you would see this kind of international venture cooperation happening? Is there anything specific you were thinking of?
No, in specific terms, but I think that if there is some project in this line, it will have the support, or it will need the support of international organization as development banks, or I think that this is the role of development bank, for example. So I think that we need to be very ambitious. We need to promote these kind of ideas for a cross-border partnerships, public-private. I really think that this is a real challenge, but I don't have any particular example of that.
Yeah, thank you.